Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 231. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, August the 14th, from the James Strong Studio in western St. Charles County. Beautiful day in East Central Missouri here. We had some storms earlier in the week, some heat earlier in the week, but this weekend, wow. Sunny, low to mid 80s, lows in the 60s. Outstanding weather. The essay today is going to be on Nazi war criminals. And you think, where did you pull that topic from, Strong? Well, it had to do with a movie that I saw on the airplane while I traveled this week. And while the movie had nothing to do with Nazi war criminals, it kind of got me thinking. So I'll talk about the movie briefly and then go into the reason for the essay. And then we'll go ahead and talk about some of the Nazi war criminals that you may or may not have heard of, how they escaped, where they escaped to, and how, for the most part, really got away scot-free with genocide. Before we do that, let's talk about a few topics in the news today. Afghanistan's in the news big time. While the troops have been, U.S. troops have been evacuated from Afghanistan, 3,000 more troops have been brought into Kabul to help evacuate those Afghanis who have served as close allies, intelligence, translators, etc. And we're getting them out before the Taliban basically takes over that whole country. I've been asked by people, what do you think about that? We're leaving those people in a lurch. We're doing this. We're doing that. There's no good solution to this problem, folks. You could say we probably should have never gone in there to begin with, but that ship has sailed. No one has ever been good at nation building, because what you do when you nation build is what you do when you nation build is you try to pass your will and your thoughts, desires, values onto others who may or may not be receptive towards that life. And we kind of did that in Afghanistan. So we negotiated with the Taliban. They promised to be good people, so we decided to pull out, and guess what? They lied. That's how Islamic fundamentalists are. They just lie. The Quran says to lie, to cheat and steal against the infidel, and they certainly follow their holy book. That being said, the Afghan army is so much better equipped than the Taliban. They have an air force, they have better weapons, but they have no desire to fight. So basically they're dropping the weapons and they're running, and the Taliban are taking over the country very quickly. Again, there's no good solution to this, but unless we want to be there forever, it's time to rip off the Band-Aid, and I think that's what we're doing, like it or not. Heard a story this week that kind of got me to think about rock groups from the past. In fact, they're doing a tour. I think the tour's about done, but the group, the Turtles. Remember the Turtles? Happy Together was their big hit. The Turtles were a very interesting group, and they were founded by two guys, Mark Volman and Howard Kalin. And these guys formed the Turtles and then decided, we don't want to be part of the Turtles, so they broke it off. Because of legal ramifications, they couldn't take the name the Turtles with them, and they couldn't even use their own names when recording music. That's right, Mark Volman and Howard Kalin, who founded the Turtles, not only could not go someplace else and call themselves the Turtles, but they couldn't go someplace else and refer to themselves as Mark Volman and Howard Kalin. So what did they do? Well, they did what every rock and roll guy, every fringe rock and roll guy did back in the day, or what many of them did. And they joined Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. And Frank Zappa named them Fluorescent Leech. That's what he named Mark Volman. And he named Howard Kalin Eddie. Well, Fluorescent Leech was shortened to Flo, and Eddie stayed as Eddie. So they became Flo and Eddie. And they got back into music, but it was more comic music, kind of the, I guess for lack of a better word, the, what's his face? Weird Al Yankovic, the Weird Al Yankovic of the day, except for they didn't do parody songs, they did their own songs. If you ever get a chance, if you've never heard of Flo and Eddie, check out some of their parody music. It's hilarious. It was done back in the 70s and 80s, so it's not politically correct at all. You can find it on YouTube. Try Flo and Eddie, Illegal, Immoral, and Fattening. That was the name of the album. And one particular cut off of the album called Living in the Jungle. It might be the most politically incorrect song you've ever heard. Check it out. It's hilarious. Also, I posted this on my Facebook page, and it had to do with the continuing news saga, the continuing news story about the Phoenix Lights, the story that won't go away. And if you read about the Phoenix Lights, they were first discovered by or first reported, I should say, to authorities by an independent pilot who was flying in the area, saw the lights, didn't know what they were, so he called the Phoenix airport, reported it. They said, look, we don't see anything. There's nothing on radar. This individual says, well, I don't know if there's anything on radar or not, but I'm telling you, I'm looking at these lights. I just want to go ahead and let you know this is happening. That independent pilot, that private pilot, was actor Kurt Russell. Yeah, that Kurt Russell. He was the first one to report the Phoenix Lights to authorities. And we're told, sorry, we see nothing on radar. The saga of the Phoenix Lights continues, and it gets more weird all the time. Well, my essay today is going to be on Nazi war criminals. 7 of the Nazi war criminals, some you've heard of, some you have not heard of. And I decided to do a podcast on this topic because of a movie that I saw on the airplane. I traveled this week, and on the airplane, we had a delay, sat on the tarmac for a long time, so my flight from Charlotte back to St. Louis took a lot longer than it normally would. I was able to see a movie. I was able to see a movie called The Good Liar. And it starred Helen Mirren and Ian McKellen. And it was an old-style movie. No superheroes, no special effects, no CGI, just a strong storyline with good actors and actresses. And the plot is, it takes place in 2009, okay? And basically it talks about 2 people who were children in Nazi Germany. And the story has nothing to do with the Nazis. It's just, it took place during that time, and they had to back it up to 2009 so that people who were alive during that time could actually be, a story could actually be made about them. Because as we get to the point where World War II ended in 1945, which was what, do the math quickly, 67 years ago, okay, something like that. It's a long time ago. And most everybody who can speak firsthand about that time, especially those who served in World War II, are dead. And those that aren't dead are darn near dead, and will be very, very shortly. So based on that story, on that movie, the indirect relationship to Nazi Germany, I wanted to do a podcast on Nazi war criminals because there were so many of them, And so many of them basically got away scot-free with genocide. So let's talk about this on today's essay. After the Allied forces defeated Germany back in World War II, Europe became a difficult place to be associated with Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. History is written by the victors, and the victors did not include the Nazis. So there were thousands of Nazi officers, high-ranking party members, collaborators, war criminals who escaped across the Atlantic, finding refuge in, of all places, South America, in particular, Argentina, Chile, and Brazil. Now, Argentina, for one, was already home to hundreds of thousands of German immigrants, and they had maintained close ties to Germany during the war. After 1945, President Juan Perón of Argentina himself was drawn to fascist ideologies, enlisted intelligence officers and diplomats to help establish rat lines, escape routes via Spanish and Italian ports for many in the Third Reich. Who else gave them aid besides the head of Argentina? Actually, the Vatican, believe it or not. And actually, in many cases, they unwittingly did this. They were just hoping to help Catholic war refugees relocate, and sometimes they happened to be war criminals. Sometimes the church knew about it, sometimes they didn't, depended on the individual. Now, as thousands of Nazis and the collaborators poured into the continent of South America, a sympathetic and sophisticated network developed, easing the transition for those who came afterwards. Now, while no definitive evidence exists that Hitler himself escaped his doomsday bunker and crossed the ocean, such a network could have made that possible. Actually, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Hitler escaped to South America. Lots of books, lots of stories, lots of movies, television shows have mentioned this. Now, did Hitler escape to South America? Probably not, okay? But many people did. And this essay is a list of some of the most notorious Nazi war criminals who did make their way to South America. As I mentioned before, some you will have heard of, some you will not have heard of. But I'm going to list the 7 that I discovered, that I uncovered, the 7 most notorious. The first one, you've all heard of him, Adolf Eichmann. Maybe the world's most wanted Nazi. Eichmann was the architect of Hitler's final solution, and he basically wanted to exterminate all Jews from Europe. Now, the notorious SS lieutenant colonel masterminded the Nazi network of death camps that resulted in the murder of approximately 6 million people. Not all Jews, but most Jews. Mostly Jews, I should say. Eichmann did orchestrate the identification, assembly of transportation of European Jews to Auschwitz, Treblinka, and other death camps in Nazi-occupied Poland. Yeah, most of the concentration camps were in Poland, not so much Germany, because I guess they didn't even want them in their country. Now, after World War II ended, Eichmann went into hiding in Austria. And with the help of a Franciscan monk in Genoa, Italy, he obtained an Argentinian visa and signed an application for a falsified Red Cross passport. In 1950, he boarded a steamship to Buenos Aires, and under the alias of Ricardo Clement, Eichmann lived with his wife and 4 children in a middle-class Buenos Aires suburb and actually worked in a Mercedes-Benz automobile plant. Israeli Mossad agents captured Eichmann in a daring operation on 11th of May, 1960, then snuck him out of the country by doping and disguising him as an El Al flight member. El Al, the national airline of Israel. Now, in Israel, Eichmann stood trial as a war criminal, responsible for deporting Jews to death in concentration camps. He was found guilty after a 4-month trial in Jerusalem and received the only death sentence ever issued by an Israeli court. He was hanged on May 30th, 1962.